Ida. Ida is a DJ and a regular guest here at Tomorrowland, right? And Ida is extremely passionate about making the world a better place and is an ambassador, has been an ambassador for Tomorrowland and for Love Tomorrow for a very long time, right? And it's through her personal connection with Steven Donziger, our next guest, that he's able to be here with us today and that they're both with us today. Ida, let's talk about your humanitarian origin story. You started a fundraiser during the lockdown because you saw the Amazon forest burning. Tell me more about that story.
Yeah, so during lockdown, when it was all over media, when Amazon was burning, I decided to start a fundraise for Amazon Watch, just to do something. And I raised, I think, 30,000 euros in a week. And that led me to read more about the work of the organization Amazon Watch. And I came across this story about Steven Donziger. Okay. And it really touched me deeply. And so I decided to make a tweet about it. And then he reached out to me personally to say thank you.
And you hit it off immediately, or?
That's how we connected, and then since then we have been working, closely on trying to get this story out.
Yeah. Last time you tried to get Steven out here, but he had some visa troubles. He couldn't get here, so you had to introduce him with a video. What does it mean to you to have him here today?
First of all, he didn't have visa troubles. His passport was confiscated, and he had spent 1,000 days in house arrest in his home in New York, and also 6 months in prison. And so then he was meant to come here, but he couldn't travel. So I introduced him, and then he sent a video message to tell his story. So yeah, the importance of having him here today is just incredible. I'm really emotional about it, having spent time with him and his son, Matthew, who is here. And yeah, it's a beautiful day.
Well, thank you for that, first of all. And then, Ida, I think you're going to do this 10 times better than I ever would. How would you introduce Steven Donziger?
I would say he's the definition of a hero, a person who, this conference is about creating a better world for future generations. And Steven has taken on the quest and mission to defend the most diverse ecosystem on our planet, the Amazon rainforest. And he won the biggest environmental court case related to oil, a $9.5 billion court case against Chevron. And then his story has been over 30 years. And that's what Steven is going to tell you about, how basically they have intimidated him. They have not paid a single dollar of those $9.5 billion to clean up. So yeah, it's been described as the Chernobyl of the Amazon. So it's a massive case. So yeah, it's an important story.
That sounds very promising. Please put your hands together for Steven Donziger, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'm so happy to be here in Belgium. It's not my first time here. I was here by video in 2022 to tell a little bit about my story fighting an oil company. I've literally been a hunted man by Chevron for 13 years after I helped indigenous peoples and farmer communities, as you can see from the pictures, win a record-breaking environmental judgment against the oil company in the Amazon of Ecuador. And one of the consequences of that endeavor is that Chevron convinced a US judge to take my passport. And for a period of 7 years, until last December, I was not allowed to leave the United States of America. And that was after over a 20-year period, I'd been to Ecuador over 250 times to help my clients, the indigenous peoples and farmer communities in the rainforest, build a campaign and a lawsuit that ultimately created the largest environmental judgment in history. Thank you, and I'm so humbled to be here, and I'm so proud of the work that we as a team were able to do. I'm so thrilled to have my son Matthew here, who in the course of this situation, Chevron was able to convince a judge to lock me up in my own home, our own home, in Manhattan for 993 days as retaliation for the work we did. And I want to talk a little bit about what happened in Ecuador, and then a little bit about the art, or what I would call the dark art, of how to persecute a human rights lawyer in a Western liberal democracy. And then I want to talk a little bit about some lessons that I think we can all draw from this experience. So, when I first went to Ecuador, it was 1993. I was just out of law school. I had gone to Harvard Law School. In my class was Barack Obama, who, as you know, later became President of the United States of America. I mention that because I came out of law school really with a very privileged position in American legal culture. And I was really honored to join a team that would go into Ecuador and try to do something to right a wrong. And when we got there, we saw pollution at apocalyptic levels. I mean, there were literally thousands of waste pits. You can see the picture here that they would burn. They gouged these waste pits out of the floor of the jungle, and then they built pipes in the side, and they would take these toxic oil wastes and run them off into rivers and streams that the local communities were relying on for their drinking water, their bathing, and their fishing. People were really hurting. There were about 1,000 of these waste pits. By the way, Texaco did this. Chevron later bought Texaco, but regardless, this was all just abandoned and left in the jungle in 1992 when Chevron closed up shop, their contract expired, and they left the country. And when we got down there, it was very obvious, as lawyers, we're trained to do law, right? Like, why don't we try to solve this problem by filing a lawsuit? And it was fascinating to me as a lawyer from the United States to learn that the people who were affected in these communities most of them had never even met a lawyer. Most of them did not know that they had a right to go into a court. They did not necessarily want to try to get Chevron to pay by doing the legal route, but we obviously convinced them otherwise. And we ended up filing a case in the United States, a class action case in 1993, seeking damages to clean this toxic mess up. This picture right here of this lady, her name is Maria Aguinda. She was the lead plaintiff for 30,000 people. This picture was taken on my very first trip to Ecuador in April of 1993. And what you see here is a bunch of oil slick roads and people who cannot afford shoes walking around barefoot, being exposed constantly to oil contaminants. The way Texaco constructed this operation, which is over a huge 1,500 square mile area, they engineered a system to pollute. This problem was not an accident. It was not like the Exxon Valdez in the United States or the Deepwater Horizon scandal. This was a system designed to offload the worst poison from oil drilling right into the most pristine environment where indigenous peoples had thrived for centuries living off the natural environment. It was really one of the most awful things I'd ever seen. To this day, I cannot get my arms around how these decisions could possibly have been made, other than the fact that the executives who made them simply did not regard this area to be populated by people. I think they actually saw the indigenous people as the other, as somehow not human beings, people who did not matter. In any event, we filed a lawsuit in the United States. The case got shifted to Ecuador at Chevron's request. This picture here is the very first day of the trial in Ecuador. And I can tell you as a lawyer, when you file a lawsuit against a powerful company and you're representing people with virtually no money, you don't necessarily get a trial. Their first job is to try to prevent a trial from happening, because a trial, whether you win or lose, lays bare evidence that's very embarrassing to the company. So we were so proud this day that we were able to get them into court, and they were literally sweating. You could see it through their shirts. They could not believe they were being held accountable. And very interestingly, psychologically, they were mad at us. They were really mad at us for filing this lawsuit. They felt like they were being victimized by what the indigenous peoples were doing to them. They're like, oh, we went down to Ecuador, we drilled oil, we benefited the country, we planted trees in a boulevard in Quito. Okay, we did all these wonderful things for your country, and now you do this to us. And it was very interesting psychologically that they were furious and angry the whole way through this lawsuit. As a matter of fact, they did everything they possibly could to sabotage the case all the way through. When we filed the case in Ecuador, I should say we refiled it, I thought it would take about 2 years. It took 9 years, on top of the 10 years that we had litigated the issue of jurisdiction in the United States. That is, the question of where the trial would be held. They wanted it held in Ecuador because they had pretty much operated with impunity there, and they thought they could just get the case dismissed through political pressure. So we had to try the case in Ecuador, and over this 8-9 year period, little by little, we overcame all their obstacles, all their subterfuge, and we ended up prevailing in 2011, winning a $19 billion pollution judgment that was later reduced to half of that on appeal, but we won the case. And there's never been a case in the world where indigenous peoples have won such a monumental victory in court against an oil company. Again, so proud of that. And by the way, thank you so much. Just to be as clear as I can, I'm not the only lawyer doing this case. There were a lot of really good lawyers working on this case. We had a team of lawyers, most of whom got paid very little or no money, who worked their butts off against dozens and dozens of Chevron lawyers who were getting paid, some of them $1,000 or $1,500 an hour to try to destroy us, okay? So I'm super proud of what we accomplished, but you know, to the Chevrons of the world and to the fossil fuel industry, this kind of thing represents a deep, deep threat, okay? We are not talking about a pollution case where you win $25 million or $100 million. This is billions of dollars. And by the way, that's not a lot of money compared to what they did, just to be clear. It might feel like a lot of money to them, but it feels like a lot of money to them because the people who won it are not used to having a lot of money. Because BP, just by comparison, ended up paying about $90 billion in damages after the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico that you might remember from 2010. So we operated on a principle that our clients were not going to accept less than what they deserved. They were going to be treated equal to people in the North. Just because they were in South America, just because they were in the rainforest, just because they were indigenous, doesn't mean that Chevron was going to get away with paying them any less money than they would in a comparable situation in the North. And we always operated on that principle. I think they knew we were really committed to a result. And after we won the case, Chevron decided to go after me personally. They decided to sue me personally. And hold on with the slides, because this is my ankle bracelet that I wore for 993 days in my home. They sued me personally for $60 billion US. 60 billion, not million, billion US dollars. I got sued for more money than anybody in the history of the United States of America. Thank you. Because I do lean into that, and I do consider it an honor of sorts, right? I mean, first of all, obviously I would never have enough money to pay such a thing. And it was all just a big intimidation game for them where they were trying to use the lawsuit to send a message to activists and lawyers all over the world that they shouldn't take them on. So, on top of that, they asked the judge in New York, who, by the way, the judge who took this case denied me a jury, and it turns out he had his own investments in Chevron while he was presiding over this case. This was a corrupt situation. And they asked that judge to order me to pay them $32 million to reimburse them for their lawyers' fees that they used to bring the case. And literally overnight, while I'm dealing with all this, while our clients in Ecuador are hurting and suffering and dying, they, without telling me, went into my bank accounts and they took literally all my money. I went from being a 55-year-old, moderately successful human rights lawyer with life savings of X, as modest as it was, to having zero overnight, nothing. They took it all. Now, I do have a family, my wife works, we weren't going to starve, but it's really obviously disconcerting to have everything taken like that. And they attacked me with the 60 billion. They took all my money. They convinced the Bar Association to disbar me. They took my ability to earn a livelihood without a hearing. And ultimately, when we kept going and we won this incredible judgment in the Supreme Court of Canada in 2015, where they validated the Ecuador judgment, they asked the US judge they were working with to try to destroy me, they asked him to hold me in contempt of court because I refused to turn over to them my confidential case file. You probably know in the law, there's nothing more confidential, there's nothing more sacrosanct than your relationship to your clients. If you have a relationship with your clients, you don't give them the other party you're fighting your case file. I'd never heard of such an order, and I was quite open with the judge. And I said, I'm not turning this over. You can hold me in contempt of court. You can fine me, do whatever you want, but I can't do this. And I knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to get my clients to fire me, because had I turned that over, it would have been a total betrayal to everything we had fought for so many years. When I refused to turn it over, the judge charged me with a crime called contempt of court. It's the only crime in a democratic system that a judge can charge. You know, normally crimes are charged by the fiscal or the prosecutor, not by judges. Judges just preside over the cases. And the judge charged me with this crime for supposedly disobeying his court order that I disobeyed on principle to protect my clients. He then took his charges to the regular prosecutor in New York, who refused to prosecute me. He's like, this case is not worthy of prosecution. Then something happened that I think holds a lesson for all of us. The judge, rather than just let it drop at that point, appointed a private Chevron law firm, that is Chevron's own lawyers, to step into the shoes of the US government, the prosecutor, to charge me criminally, that is to bring the prosecution against me, even though the regular federal prosecutor refused to do so. What that means is I got prosecuted criminally by an oil company. I got prosecuted by an oil company, not by a government. Look, you've heard a lot of oppressive, unfair prosecutions by governments all over the place, particularly today, and in the United States. I've never heard of one where an oil company or a corporation directly gets the power from government to prosecute. And that's what they did to me. I became the first corporate political prisoner that I know of in history. Sorry for that phrase, but I don't know what else to call it, because there had never been anyone prosecuted by a private corporation before in US history, and there hasn't been anyone since. I was being prosecuted by the same lawyers I'd beaten in court in Ecuador. They came back and the first thing they did was they locked me up. They put this ankle bracelet on me, That's me and my son Matthew in our home in Manhattan. You can see the ankle bracelet on my lower left leg. But this went on for almost 3 years, including a period of 6 weeks where they put me in a prison, a federal prison in New York. There had never been a lawyer who had spent even a day in federal prison for this low-level misdemeanor offense of contempt of court for which I was innocent. The case ended up being condemned by the United Nations, by 68 Nobel laureates, by actually 5 different US federal judges condemned it, and ultimately it held because the judge who did it had enough power within the judicial system to maintain it. And one of the lasting effects, and by the way, this all ended in 2022 after 993 days. I got out, physically free. And the worst part about all this is the people down there are still hurting. I mean, Luis, Rosa, friends of mine, have all passed away from cancer in recent years. There's a slow massacre happening in this part of the world because of oil pollution and because of Chevron's refusal to recognize that it lost a case and its refusal to comply with the court judgment. It's awful. But I just want to say this on the bright side, okay? Because it's not all awful. The point of this whole exercise from their point of view was to stop the case and intimidate other lawyers and activists from doing these types of cases. They not only wanted to win the case, they wanted to kill the very idea you could do this kind of case. They were really emotional about it. And the case is still alive. They wanted to silence me. I'm still here. They wanted me to give up. I did not. And they wanted to pretty much use this case as a way to intimidate anyone who does this work. And that's not happened because our movements, the environmental movement, the legal movement, continues to grow in strength despite very sophisticated efforts, particularly in the United States and other countries now, to try to repress us. So I just want to say that I am physically free right now. Not that I don't have challenges, I do. The case is still alive. They failed to kill it. They failed to silence me. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that we have accomplished this. It's an incredible accomplishment, and it happened with the support of so many people around the world. I don't know how many of you were familiar with this story before I showed up today, but we have had solidarity from literally hundreds of thousands of people around the world who've supported these communities as they continue to fight. And right now, we are continuing the campaign and seeking law firms in countries where Chevron has assets to file enforcement actions to force the collection of the judgment that these communities have been waiting years and years and years to collect, waiting for their day of justice. Now, I want to say this in closing. There are a lot of efforts being made in this world today. I mean, Donald Trump is the leading example, but there's many others, as you know, in Europe and elsewhere. Elon Musk, Palantir, there are very sophisticated technologies, AI being one of them, that if used for nefarious purposes, can really blunt the ability of us to have the political space to organize, to create the kind of just and compassionate world that we all want. I have noticed in the course of my experience that as we grow stronger, the tools of repression grow more sophisticated. I'm seeing it all the time. And there's weapons they're inventing, they plan to aim at those who do this work that we don't even know about yet. The way to counteract that, in my view, is to work together. This work cannot be done alone. That might be obvious, but I'm going to repeat it. Because if I made one mistake, I was working a lot out of my apartment, at my kitchen table, and I think they perceived me as someone who was really, really vulnerable. They thought, well, we can get that guy who doesn't have a lot of resources, we can bring down the whole thing. And it's critically important that movements happen that involve a lot of people. But I'll also say a lot of movements don't get started until somebody, one person or a small group of people, have the vision and the courage to take that first step. And a lot of times young people say, well, how can we do this? What do you think we should do? And I always say, I don't know what you should do exactly, but if you have a desire to do something, you've got to do something. You've got to take that step. And to take that step requires vision, courage, solidarity, and intelligent planning. And I think that I'm seeing so much of that going on in the world today. I think this gathering tonight, what's going to happen over the next couple of days at Tomorrowland, is an example of humanity coming together in spirit and joy, which to me exists in defiance of the darker forces in the world today that are trying to keep us apart. So I'll close by saying, thank you for having me. I've been waiting for this day for years. Okay, I was here in 2022 on the video. And thanks to Ida, by the way, who I met on Instagram while I was detained. We've become good friends, and she's the one who has helped bring me into this world. So thank you, Ida Engberg. If you just think about what happens when people who stand for justice come together in solidarity, when that happens, something always moves out of that. It always moves out of that. We see this all over the place. And I'm so honored to be here. I'm so proud of everyone for showing up. And I'm really happy to participate in this event, which to me represents the best of the possibility of what we can create. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your attention. Thank you.